Shalom, everyone. Imagine waiting years for God's promises while everything around you seems to move in the opposite direction. Joseph had endured betrayal by his brothers, slavery in a foreign land, false accusation, and imprisonment. Yet, in a single moment, God the Father begins to reverse his circumstances. The prison that seemed like the end of Joseph's story becomes the doorway to his destiny. Today's Torah reading comes from Genesis chapter 41, verse 26, all the way to verse 57. After Pharaoh recounts his dream, Joseph explains that God has revealed what is about to happen. The 7 healthy cows and 7 good years of grain represent 7 years of abundance, while the 7 thin cows and 7 scorched years of grain represent 7 years of famine. Joseph tells Pharaoh that 7 years of great abundance will come upon Egypt, but they will be followed by 7 years of severe famine, so devastating that the years of prosperity will be forgotten. The famine will consume the land with such intensity that people will scarcely remember the years of abundance. Joseph also explains that Pharaoh saw the dream twice because the matter has been firmly established by God and will soon come to pass. The repetition of Pharaoh's dream shows that this decree has already been determined in heaven. Joseph then offers Pharaoh a plan. He advises Pharaoh to appoint wise and discerning men over the land of Egypt. Administrators should collect 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of abundance and store it in cities throughout the land. These reserves would sustain the nation during the coming famine and prevent the land from perishing. The plan seemed good in the eyes of Pharaoh and all his servants. Pharaoh turned to his court and said, "Can we find a man like this, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" It is remarkable that even a pagan ruler recognizes the Spirit of God in Joseph. Much in the same way, many people who encountered Yeshua recognized that he was divine. Nicodemus acknowledges Yeshua and he says, "No one could do miracles that you are doing unless God is with you." Pharaoh then said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as discerning and wise as you." Joseph is then elevated to the highest position in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh removes his signet ring and places it on Joseph's hand. He clothes him in fine linen garments and places a gold chain around his neck. These symbols represent authority, honor, and kingship. In the New Testament, the exalted Messiah is also described as receiving glory and honor. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 9 says that Yeshua is crowned with glory and honor. Joseph rides in Pharaoh's second chariot, and people cry out before him and bow their knees. Pharaoh declares that although he remains king, no one in Egypt will lift a hand or a foot without Joseph's authority. In a similar way, the New Testament declares that after his resurrection, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Yeshua, mentioned in Matthew chapter 28 verse 18. The Apostle Paul also writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 27 that God has placed all things under his feet. Pharaoh also gives Joseph a new name, Zephanath Paneah, and gives him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, as his wife. Joseph, a Hebrew who has been rejected by his own brothers, now receives honor among nations. Some see this as prophetic pattern. Yeshua himself was rejected by many among his own people, yet his message spread to the nations and gathers a people from every tribe and nation as his bride. Joseph was 30 years old when he began serving Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Interestingly, the Gospel of Luke tells us that Yeshua was also about 30 years old when he began his public ministry. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced in great quantity. Joseph gathered the food from those years and stored in the cities throughout Egypt. The grain became so abundant that it was described as being like the sand of the sea beyond measure. During this time, 2 sons were born to Joseph through Asenath. He named the first Manasseh, saying, "God has made me forget all my hardships and all my father's house." He named the second Ephraim, saying, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." Even in a foreign land, God continued to bring fruitfulness out of Joseph's suffering. Then the 7 years of abundance came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine spread throughout many lands, but in Egypt there was bread. When the people of Egypt cried to Pharaoh for food, Pharaoh told them, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he tells you." Joseph opened the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. Soon the famine spread beyond Egypt, and people from all nations came to Egypt to buy grain because the famine was so severe across the world. So Joseph had become the one who provided bread during the famine. This moment carries a powerful Messianic echo. Just as the nations came to Joseph for bread in the time of famine, Yeshua later declares in John chapter 6 verse 35, "I am the bread of life." Nations came to Joseph for grain. Humanity comes to Messiah for the bread that gives eternal life. In Jewish tradition, there is a concept of Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David. Messiah ben Joseph is often seen as a suffering servant who prepares the way, while Messiah ben David is the reigning king who brings restoration and peace. In the story of Joseph, we see the pattern that reflects these themes. Joseph suffers, is rejected, and yet becomes the instrument through whom life is preserved. In a similar way, Yeshua first came as the suffering servant and will return as the reigning king. Back in the land of Canaan, Jacob hears there is grain in Egypt. He tells his sons to go down to Egypt and buy food so that they may live and not die. This sets the stage for the next dramatic moment in the story. The brothers who once sold Joseph into slavery will soon stand before the very one God has raised to save them. The Joseph's narrative reminds us that God is always working behind the scenes of our lives. What appears to be delay, hardships, or injustice may actually be preparation for a greater purpose. If God orchestrated Pharaoh's dream to bring reconciliation to Israel, deliverance to the nations, how much more might the events unfolding around Israel today be a part of his greater plan, preparing the stage for Yeshua's return to fulfill the role of Messiah ben David in the last days. Tomorrow, we will continue the story and see how the meeting between Joseph and his brothers unfold. Until then, stay blessed.